Good day, dear students. Today, with our nutrition and dietetics class, we are going to start the discussion on the topic carbohydrates. So let me share the screen. So, as you all aware that nutrition and following the diet is very important for an individual. Balanced diet is very important for a healthy individual to maintain the normal process of human life. Considering that we have a OE paper, open elective paper named as Nutrition and Dietetics. So the topic which we are going to start today, as you all aware that you have a different nutrients which are required for the normal functioning of our body. And those includes macronutrients, micronutrients, etc. We are going to discuss about a macronutrient named as the carbohydrates. As the name depicts, it is a mixture of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So with the symbol of CHO, it is the mixture of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And it includes the sugar. The sugar which we mean here not only is going to be glucose, but also the different types of sugars like galactose, mannose, uh, and there are so many monosaccharides to classify. Similarly, there are disaccharides, which are sugars like sucrose. For example, sucrose is the one which is called as the table sugar, as we use for the preparation of coffee or tea, etc. Likewise, there are many other polysaccharides, which are known as starches. So the mention of starch here in the slide is starch plays a very crucial role in our body. The reason is our rice which we consume actually contains so much of starch, which actually gives instant energy and in the form of glucose. So that starch is rich in, it is present in rice, it is present in potatoes. So it is called as the plant reserve food material as well. And we are also going to have some discussion about the fibers. So carbohydrates, as I mentioned, it has a symbol of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So hydrogen with two atoms and oxygen and carbon as well there. So simple carbohydrates are monosaccharides, which we call it as the single sugars. Disaccharides, which has two sugars, which are joined together by a glycosidic linkage. Complex carbohydrates includes polysaccharides. Polysaccharides contains many number of sugars. So carbohydrates have monosaccharides, which has one sugar. Disaccharides have two sugar, which are joined together by glycosidic linkages. And polysaccharides have many number of sugars. Many number of sugars in the sense a single polysaccharide is going to contain 1,000 to 10,000 number of sugar molecules joined together by glycosidic linkage. Now coming to the simple carbohydrates, monosaccharides, as the name means that mono means single, saccharides means sugar. Saccharides holds the meaning of sugar. So mono means single, so it has single sugar. And a very good example is glucose, which has the formula of C6H12 and O6. It has 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms, and 6 oxygen atoms. And so the molecular formula of C6H12O6. So glucose is a very common monosaccharides, and other examples of monosaccharides includes fructose and galactose as well. Glucose, as we all aware that it is also called as the dextrose or blood sugar. As you all aware that our blood sugar is very important for the normal maintenance of the sugar level. So glucose level should be to the expected range for any individual of different age. So glucose is going to be a very important sugar which is present in our blood, and it has to be regulated properly, and it is regulated properly through hormones like insulin and glucagon. and it is considered as a primary fuel for the body, as all the cells of our body requires glucose to do various processes. For example, one glucose takes up one cell takes up glucose and utilize the same glucose to carry out the process of glycolysis followed by TCA cycle. So ultimately, glycolysis leads to the production of ATP. So is the case of TCA cycle, which also produce ATP as well. So only through glucose, the important process that involves breakdown of glucose, which we call it as glycolysis, happens. So it is considered as a primary fuel for the body. All the cells in our body requires glucose. For example, brain cells especially requires so much of glucose in a particular day. And this glucose is also present in disaccharides. For example, if you think of maltose, maltose is a disaccharide which is composed of glucose and glucose, which is joined together by glycosidic linkage. So is the case of polysaccharides, which also has many number of glucose units. For example, starch, as I told you, which is called as a reserve food material of plants, and it has many number of glucose joined together by glycosidic linkage. Another important sugar is going to be fructose, which is commonly present in fruits, honey, and some syrups. And it converts to glucose in the body. So if it is going to be any type of sugar in our body, to the maximum, those different types of sugar will be converted to glucose so that it is acting as a fuel and it provides various functions in our body. So fructose, which is called as a fruit sugar, which is commonly present in fruit, is converted to glucose in our body. Another important monosaccharide is going to be galactose. So galactose is a monosaccharide which is a part of lactose. Lactose is called as a milk sugar. So lactose is a good example of a disaccharide which we'll be discussing in the future classes. And this lactose consists of glucose and galactose. So galactose is a part of a milk sugar. So it is found in milk and it is converted to glucose in the body again, as we discussed with the case of fructose as well. Moving on to disaccharides, as you are aware that the meaning of di holds two. So two sugars are joined together by glycosidic linkage. Good examples, as I told you, maltose, which is composed of glucose and glucose. Sucrose is going to be of glucose and fructose, and lactose is of glucose and galactose. Sucrose, which we all already know that it is called as the table sugar, as I mentioned, it is going to be of two sugars which are joined together by glycosidic linkage, and those two sugars includes glucose and fructose. It is refined from sugar beets and sugar cane. Lactose, as I told you, it is called as a milk sugar, which is composed of glucose and galactose. And this is an interesting condition called as lactose intolerance, wherein we Indians and especially the people who are living in the Asian countries, we are suffering from spontaneous leaky mutation and we are lactose intolerant individuals. So what does it mean? When you consume more amount of milk in a particular day, it actually causes flatulence and constipation. This is due to the partial synthesis of lactase enzyme in our gut. So the partial synthesis of the enzyme lactase is able to process or digest only a very small amount of lactose in a particular day. And because of that, additional amount of lactose which is taken through milk is not getting digested, and that results in a condition called as lactose intolerance. And we Indians and especially Asians are lactose intolerant people. People who are living in Arabian countries and Jews, they are considered to be lactose tolerant people. This lactose intolerance is a condition which is caused due to a spontaneous leaky mutation. There is another important disaccharide which we call it as maltose, which is also known as malt sugar, which is composed of glucose and glucose. So it is present in germinating seeds, and it is also produced in malt beverages, especially in the production of beer or some wine related products as well. So this is the reaction which I don't want to give much importance about the structure, but for your information, this is how the glycosidic linkage is formed with a simple removal of water. Say for example, this is going to be glucose and glucose. Okay, that results in the formation of maltose. And this reaction, we call it as a condensation reaction. And there is also hydrolysis reaction that involves the removal of water. Okay, and that actually again splits maltose into two monosaccharides, that is glucose and glucose. Moving on to the complex carbohydrates. Now, before we talk about complex carbohydrates, we need to understand the meaning of the word complex here. Complex we actually use because of huge number of sugars. For example, polysaccharides are good examples of complex carbohydrates, accumulates many number of sugar units which are joined together by glycosidic linkage. As we discussed in disaccharides, we have only two sugars there. But here in complex carbohydrates, we actually have, as I told you before, 1,000 to 10,000 sugars which are joined together by glycosidic linkage. And because of that, they have a very high molecular weight and they are called as the complex carbohydrates. So as we are aware that polysaccharides are called as the complex carbohydrates. So glycogen, starch, and some fibers are good examples of complex carbohydrates as well. So we'll be discussing that one by one. So glycogen, this is called as the reserve food material of animals. As you know, it is called as a reserve food material because animals actually store this glycogen in liver and muscles for future use. And that is why we call them as the reserve food material. So glycogen contains chains of glucose which are present in animals, and it also helps to maintain the blood glucose level. So glycogen is actually stored in the cells in the form of very large number of glucose units. When blood glucose level is low, this glycogen is broken down into glucose units and it is released in the blood. Again, starch is considered to be the reserve food material of plants, as basically plants actually store their food material in the form of starch. We animals and we human beings, we actually store our food material in the form of glycogen, whereas plants actually store it in the form of starch. So that is why we call this starch as a reserve food material of plants. So good examples include cereal grains. As I told you, it is very enormously found in rice, corn, beans, peas, and some root vegetables, as I told you, like potatoes. And coming to the second category, now you have to understand. See, these starch and glycogen are good examples of digestible carbohydrates. Now, digestible carbohydrates, what do you mean by that? Digestible in the sense when I am consuming it, when I am taking that as a food, my digestive system is able to digest those carbohydrates. They are called as digestible carbohydrates. Now, those which we call as fibers, they are mostly coming under the category of indigestible carbohydrates. So these fibers are indigestible carbohydrates. When you consume them, our body does not have any enzymes to degrade or digest those types of carbohydrates. For example, cellulose is a good example of an indigestible carbohydrate which is present in the plant cell walls. As you all know that plants actually have cell walls with them. We human beings and animals, we do not have cell walls. Maybe some prokaryotic organisms actually have cell walls, whereas plants also do possess cell walls as well. And they are classified according to their solubility in water, and they are present in whole grains, legumes, fruits, and vegetables as well. Okay, now speaking about the digestion again, the food which we consume, if it is rich in glucose, the digestion actually starts within our mouth. So, for example, when I am taking potatoes, when I am eating potato, a potato is the one which actually is rich in starch. Starch is the one which contains many number of glucose. many number of glucose units which are joined together by glycosidic bond. This glycosidic bond is actually broken with the help of an enzyme called as salivary amylase. So the carbohydrate food which we consume and its digestion starts from our mouth itself. Later on, those carbohydrates are going into our stomach and they are further digested by some enzymes like maltase, sucrase, lactase respectively in small intestine as well. So some part of digestion is also happening in pancreas by pancreatic amylase, and the what do you call the waste products of this digestion is excreted through large intestine that includes water, gas, and some short chains of fatty acids as well. So this is a diagrammatic representation of how carbohydrates is getting digested. As I told you, the digestion starts from the mouth. It also happens in the stomach and small intestine, pancreas. And now, glucose, as I told you in the beginning itself, is a very important sugar in our body. The reason is the necessity of glucose. The necessity of glucose by the different millions and billions of cells which are present in our body. Each and every cell requires glucose. So for that reason, glucose plays a very important, a very crucial role in the metabolism of a human body. As I told you, excess of glucose is actually stored in the cells in the form of glycogen, and 1/3 of is actually stored in the liver, and also 2/3 is stored in the muscles. Okay, and when glucose is produced from proteins, there is a pathway which we call it as gluconeogenesis. Now, this gluconeogenesis is a pathway which is happening in our body during starvation. When we are hungry, or when we are not having any food for a very long period of time. So for example, for many religious beliefs, some individuals used to fast for a day or even 2 days perhaps. So in those conditions, a mechanism which is helpful in balancing the level of glucose is going to be gluconeogenesis. And when that happens from the proteins, we call them as gluconeogenesis, and they can also be converted to fat when in excess of body actually requirement is needed. Now, coming to the some harmful effects of sugars. When sugars are consumed in excess, so it is very important that the required amount has to be taken. Excess of sugar, may actually lead to malnutrition. As you all aware that small children consume so much of chocolates, which actually is rich in glucose and other different types of sugar, and that the excess of sugar which children consume, is going to be converted to acid, in our mouth, and that acid is going to attack our tooth, and that actually causes the damage in the tooth, which results in tooth decay. It can also cause obesity, diabetes, heart diseases, and behavior problems. And as you all aware that sugar is considered to be a very important component for causing obesity and also for heart diseases. Now, coming to the recommended intakes of sugar, it is recommended that not more than 25% of the total daily intake should be there for an individual. So in excess, if it is taken, it actually causes complications. So limit the added sugars to at least less than 10% of the total energy intake. So the complex carbohydrates can actually cause heart diseases. I can actually give you a practical example of that. Chitin, chitin is considered to be a complex carbohydrate which is present in the cell wall of fungi and also in the exoskeleton of crabs. So people who are consuming crabs are affected by some allergic reactions and immunological disorders because of that. Okay, so it is very important that we have to take it in a balanced way. I mean, those digestible carbohydrates has to be taken, and indigestible carbohydrates should be avoided. So, high amount of complex carbohydrates can actually be beneficial, which is going to lower the fat levels and calories. So, as I told you, when you are consuming high amount of digestible carbohydrates, it actually leads to complications. But low levels of digestible carbohydrates and high levels of complex carbohydrates can be beneficial. So the soluble fibers, when you consume soluble fibers, it is going to lower blood cholesterol levels, glucose absorption, slow the transition of food through the upper gastrointestinal tract, and it holds the moisture in tools and softening them, and it also lowers the risk of heart disease and diabetes. Soluble fibers are rich or are actually present in whole grains, fruits, legumes, husks, and vegetables. Insoluble fibers, as I told you, is going to increase the fecal weight. Okay, and it helps to form soft and bulky stools, which improves gastrointestinal motility and reduces the risk of constipation and hemorrhoids. And it also speeds the fecal passage from the large intestine through colon. So insoluble fibers includes cellulose, lignins, hemicelluloses. And these are, only a very small amount. So cellulose, please don't think that we are going to take so much of cellulose. So much of cellulose which we are taking, it is going to cause complications. Limited, required. So that is rich in brown rice, fruits, legumes, seeds, and vegetables. So the recommended intake of carbohydrates and fibers is going to be the recommended dietary allowance is going to be 130 grams per day. 45 to 65 of the percentage of the total daily energy intake is going to be on this. And the fiber intake, it should be of 25 grams per day. Okay. So these carbohydrates, which is actually rich, present in rice, and other types of, insoluble vegetables, insoluble fibers. So that is going to be 130 grams per day, and this is going to be 25 grams per day fibers. So this is the dietary recommendation. So if 2000 kilocalories, then it is going to be 1100 to 1200 kilocalories as carbohydrates, which has to be taken. If the total is 2000, 1100 to 1200 is going to be carbohydrates. Thank you.